Welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh Dorian, Chris Brown, they are here with me. It's a Monday morning where I am correct. It's a Monday morning where I could not be correcter. And that's the correct English there. Bucs beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl last night in pretty dominating fashion, as we've covered in the first segment of the show. Tom Brady gets ring number 7, which is just ridiculous. I mean, like, I saw a tweet. I think it was from PFF. Is that what it is? Is that the advanced stats?
Yeah, Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, Pro Football Focus. That it was just so it was like Tom Brady 7, Patriots 6, 49ers 6, or whoever it was. Like that was just the most Super Bowl wins. That was just that was the tweet. Absolutely ridiculous. But word on the street is that Josh has something else he wants to talk about. So lay it on us. What's your final big observation as you have so nicely described it?
Yeah. What this game really reminded us of, for me, is the exact reason why I'm never afraid to pick against the quote-unquote lesser quarterback in the Super Bowl, which is that no matter how much better your roster is, and not that the Chiefs is light years ahead of the Buccaneers, but I think we'd all agree the overall better team plays in Kansas City. This game doesn't change that. But no matter how much of an edge you have,
this version of the Bucs is better than the version of the like the version of the Chiefs that doesn't have a healthy offensive line. The Bucs are definitely the better team.
Sure, yeah, and that goes into
and a healthy Mahomes.
Right. That no matter how good your roster is, you can only have so much of a margin of error in the NFL. It's just the reality of the situation. It's different in the NBA where you can have Steph, Clay, Draymond, Kevin Durant, and you can lose one of them to a torn ACL and you're still the best team in the NBA. It's just not comparable. Mm-hmm. And so whether it was Britt Reed's car crash, Mahomes' turf toe, the offensive line injuries, or just having a bad day, whether that's the lack of discipline, getting called for some not blatantly obvious defensive penalties, so the refs don't quite have your back on this given day, whatever it might be, that the Chiefs are vulnerable to this kind of game. That there is no one player, no one thing that can make you invincible. Mm. Maybe they still win if it's just Patrick Mahomes' turf toe and the offensive line is intact. Maybe they get at least closer if Mahomes is 100%, even if the offensive line isn't. Who knows what impact not having Britt Reed and what's going on there had with this. It's just a reminder that it goes back to this thing where sometimes I feel like we overvalue quarterbacks. And of course, Patrick Mahomes is far and away the most valuable player in football. No doubt about it. But I look at situations where, for example, the Carolina Panthers are looking at, they tried to trade for Matthew Stafford. It seems like they're going to take a quarterback in the first round this year. Instead of trying to use that first round pick to go get another really good player to pair with Christian McCaffrey and Teddy Bridgewater, because we're so obsessed with having the really, really good quarterback. And yes, of course, that's important.
Dude, did you see who was in the Super Bowl last night?
Yeah. But again, what's the story of the Super Bowl? It's not Tom Brady, it's that defense.
But who gets there?
Okay, but
you're not going to get there if you don't have those guys.
Who threw 40 touchdowns?
You can't get there without those guys, though.
Right. You gotta have everything. You gotta have really good quarterback play and all of the. But my point just being, it's another reminder that the idea, even on a broader level, we don't need to get down that rabbit hole right now. But looking at two teams and saying, I want the one that has Patrick Mahomes. Yes, there's absolutely some value to that, but this is just another reminder for me that in this sport in particular and in this league with its parity, there just is no sure thing. As good as Mahomes is in as many things as he can cover up, he can't protect you against everything. It just all kind of went wrong at the wrong time for the Chiefs, and even the team that looked invincible can end up not scoring a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Sure. But the people who picked the Chiefs also didn't pick the Chiefs just because of Patrick Mahomes. They picked the Chiefs because they are, because you just said that the Chiefs on paper were the better football team.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, right, I'm never going to, because to a certain extent, I disagree with you. I'm going to pick the team. I picked these two teams because of the quarterbacks they have, not because of the other guys. I mean, if you put Chad Henne in the starting quarterback, you know,
of course.
Right. It's right. Nobody wins a Super Bowl without a complete football team. But there are also plenty of really complete football teams other than their quarterback.
Who don't get anywhere close.
Who don't get in. I mean, I would argue the Browns have a roster, but I don't have any faith in Baker Mayfield to get me to a Super Bowl. But the weapons they have on both sides of the football, they have one of the three best defensive players on the planet right now, and more weapons than almost anybody, especially when Odell Beckham Jr. is healthy on the offensive side of the football. But nobody was picking the Browns to get. I guess if I had to pick, I mean, if you look at the last 10 years, I mean, the last 15 years, Brady has 7, and Mahomes has been to 2 and almost 3, right? So, and in between, Manning got 2. Even if Manning wasn't the reason necessarily they won the second one, it was still Manning. It's Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl. It's Aaron Rodgers has a Super Bowl. I'm not sure that Nick Foles getting one makes me change my mind about how important quarterbacks are.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just not. I didn't come away from this game I came away thinking from this game that the Bucs were the better football team, including their quarterback. I still think your quarterback needs to be the better quarterback to win Super Bowls. And it's never like we finish a Super Bowl and everything else on the field went right for the team that won, except they didn't have the better quarterback. They almost always have the better quarterback on that day.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure, and
go ahead.
And I mean, you also look at, for example, Joe Flacco can be the better quarterback on that day, who was also
who also had a phenomenal season that year,
right? And who was a very good quarterback. Yeah, to me, there's a difference. I'm just saying there's a difference between Joe Flacco and Tom Brady.
Sure.
But, quarterback's the most valuable position in sports. No doubt about it. I'm not trying to say you can just throw anybody out there at quarterback and win a Super Bowl. But specifically the idea that Patrick Mahomes is so good that he can completely compensate for not having an offensive line.
Sure.
For example, that kind of thinking is really what I'm getting to here.
Sure.
That they're right. There are some givens that you got to have a great team. You got to have a really good quarterback that at least can make plays when you need them on third down and take care of the football. All that stuff. Absolutely. And I don't think anybody thought the Chiefs' offensive line was going to be that much of a problem.
Sure.
But that is all it takes for Patrick Mahomes to look like an average quarterback to the extent that he can, because he was still making those ridiculous throws. And his guys drop a couple passes. And all of a sudden, he has a really bad game. Not his fault at all. Doesn't change how I feel about Mahomes, like you said earlier, Josh. But that's all it takes. And he looks completely different. That's my point.
Sure.
Yeah. That's part of what makes football so tricky to predict. Like, so hard for me. I mean, I'm in so much of the mindset of, right, like with baseball, right? It's so independent. Like, individual players do individual things in that sport. I mean, obviously it's a team game, but at the end of the day, it's sort of just all stats. Things are more independent, where this game sort of like reminded me again how much one thing compounds into another. One area of weakness where you could have, and again, the Chiefs didn't have just one thing going wrong for them. They had, like you mentioned, but in some sense, it wasn't as if Mahomes was injured. The offense, like, it could have been worse. I guess it's sort of how a couple of small things can all of a sudden, like, I looked at that and I said, okay, Mahomes his toe, he's not quite as mobile, and the offensive line, it's not going to be as great. And obviously we didn't expect what we saw, but I was still sort of like, okay, but this is a team that has, 8 different things where I'm like, okay, they're great in these 8 things. And so taking a little bit off of 1 or 2 of those things, I was like, oh, well, there's still all those other 6 things that they're great at.
Right. It makes me think that they might be vulnerable.
Right.
Right.
And so there's that idea that like in my head mindset I was like, oh, if there's 8 things they're great at and they're a little bit weak in 2 or 3 of them, I'm not all that concerned. When the reality is, if that's a baseball lineup that we're talking about, the Dodgers are missing 2 starters and their catcher. Well, yeah, that doesn't really affect Mookie Betts. Like, I mean, it's sort of like that's independent. But here you've got a situation where those 2 or 3 areas where they're a little bit weak can compound on each other, can make it easier for a team to game plan against those other things. All of a sudden, you lose multi-dimensionality, if that's a word. And all of a sudden, it becomes it just all compounds and makes the recipe for a team to all of a sudden, right, going from, I again, 8 is not, it's just an arbitrary number, but going from 8 things that you're great at on a given, for a team down to 6 or 5 or whatever it might be, all of a sudden it becomes that much easier for a team to game plan against you, to come up with a plan that, if you can do X, then that takes out their strength 1, 2, and 3 potentially. It all compounds on each other, and that's one thing that I sort of was reminded of.
And specifically when we're talking about games of this magnitude against teams that are this good,
right,
where you're picking small margins.
Exactly.
That's really also part of this for me, is that so that's where I never have a massive concern picking against the lesser quarterback in the quote unquote lesser quarterback in the Super Bowl, because if you get to the Super Bowl, that means
picking against or picking for.
Against.
Picking
Whether
against
it's
the lesser. Picking
sorry,
against the lesser.
four. Sorry.
Okay.
I did a double negative there. Sorry.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, yeah. The sort of scared of pulling the upset. Not that it always happens. Not that I'm always going to pick it. But I didn't feel bad about picking the Buccaneers, even though I thought the Chiefs roster was better, because there was a whole. Now, I didn't think it was going to go this way at all. But there was when you're looking at these teams and how good the Chiefs are, or the Buccaneers are defensively, and how good Brady's been, and the weapons that they have, there's just, if a couple things go wrong, that is the difference between one great team winning or one other great team winning instead. Even if that team is still that much, little bit better than everybody else, like the Chiefs are, there's just no way to protect yourself from something like this happening. No, nobody saw it coming.
I will say I'm genuinely intrigued by what the final score of this game would have been if Patrick Mahomes was actually healthy.
Valid point, right?
Because I really do feel like there were plays that he just would have made that he wasn't able to, because he just wasn't moving very well. Relatively speaking, he was still the best moving quarterback on the field, compared to Tom Brady. But my point being is that I genuinely think that he makes up for more of it on a night when he's healthy.
Completely agree.
Sure, yeah.
I don't think they win, right? Because if everything goes the same way, but Patrick Mahomes is completely healthy and playing specifically like he was last playoffs, not that he had a bad playoffs, he was just banged up for a lot of this one. And he was phenomenal in the AFC Championship game. This isn't, right, like you said, this isn't a conversation about Mahomes' abilities in the playoffs. But, right, I'm genuinely curious, because it really was the worst possible matchup for the Chiefs in their current state.
Yep.
It couldn't have been a worse front five to go up against when your offensive line is out of sorts for multiple reasons, and Mahomes can't get away from the pressure as well as he typically can. The score wouldn't have been within a field goal, but I also think it would have been closer to the 31-21 than it was 31 than it was 31-9. It is and to be clear, it certainly is, right. If I had to pick a really good team and an okay quarterback, or an okay team and a really good quarterback, I'd probably go with the really good team, just because the way that football is played. But I will continue to be on the side of, I want the difference maker in a football game every single time, and typically the team with the better quarterback has the ultimate trump card and the ultimate playmaker, the ultimate difference maker on the football field. And right, this Super Bowl, it wasn't Brady.
It has been in the past.
But it has been in the past.
I absolutely will concede.
And I guess, yeah, because of course, to a certain extent, the argument is pointless because you just need a good football team to win the Super Bowl, right? Everywhere, in all corners of, you just can't have big holes if you want to win a Super Bowl. But last night the holes were too big for even Patrick Mahomes to completely fill, especially that version of Patrick Mahomes.
That's a really good way to put what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
Sure. Mr. Brown, anything else you'd like to talk about?
I just have a real quick stat. I think we've kind of gone through most everything I had here. The Bucs are the first team ever with 4 30-point games in a postseason. Just sort of, that was just stood out to me because I obviously it's a fact, it's true, but I just didn't really like. I don't know. I was just like, I didn't. It's a fact. It's true. It's just like one of those things where it's like, oh, really? I wasn't sort of like. I just didn't get that sense throughout the playoffs, that they were in this dominating offensively quite in that.
That's
way.
Exactly what that's the first thought I had. I was like, wait a second, we haven't talked about how fantastic the Bucs offense has been at any point in this.
It's like, so I was just like, it's a stat that I just like, I mean, yeah, but that's not really the way I was thinking about this postseason for the Bucs. They're also the first team to beat 3 Super Bowl MVP quarterbacks in a single postseason. Mahomes, Rodgers, Breeze. So there's your another fun fact.
What a ridiculous stat.
They just went out and casually beat Mahomes, Rodgers, and Breeze. No big deal. But yeah, those are my only other stats. I don't have any other
about Alex
areas.
Smith. Don't forget about Alex Smith. I mean, they beat him too.
That's true. I'll also just add real quick the penalties thing. This is at one point at halftime. I thought this was something we were really going to be talking about. I was, because it was one of those things where if this game was 21-31 or 24-31, all of a sudden it'd be like, oh, we should talk about these penalties. And obviously, it was a little bit out of hand for the officials. The Chiefs didn't catch any breaks there, but it's also just one of those things where it's one of those things where I think it's right that we're not talking about that a lot, because at the end of the day, we'll talk about it if it's close. Make it close, and I'll talk about the role of penalties. Otherwise, it's one of those things where I'm like, they had the most penalties in a half by any team in Super Bowl history. That obviously was a big factor in their in how that first half went. But it's one of those things where I'll talk about the role the officials may have played in that if you get this to a 2-possession game, maybe. Otherwise, I just don't even want to entertain it that much.
And
go ahead.
Can we please decide what we want from officials? 2 weeks ago, it was, well, they're not calling anything. And then all of a sudden, you're going to call this one, and it changes the Packers-Buccaneers game. So we need the refs to call something. And now, all of a sudden, the refs are calling too much. I stand by...
It's just human nature.
Yeah, right. And part of this is just
it's an impossible
out of
job.
My frustration.
It's an impossible job.
Yeah. I stand by what I said in the NFC Championship game, which is I have no problem, and I tweeted this during the game, with calling those sort of questionable but also completely justifiable holds to send the message that you're not getting away with grabbing guys and doing whatever you want in the secondary, that we're going to call something so we don't get into a position like we were where everybody was upset in the NFC Championship game. You can't have it both ways. And like you said, Josh, it's an impossible job. Also, like you said, Chris, thank goodness this is not what we're talking about, because Tampa Bay so clearly deserved to win that it's just not a conversation with him.
And 11 penalties for 120 yards is just not disciplined football. I don't give a damn who the referees are.
Personal fouls.
Don't put your team in 11 different positions to get a foul, and to get important. It's not just, I mean, maybe for this one play, even if you've been picking and scratching at the wide receiver the entire game, maybe for this particular play, where if you get caught for pass interference, that it doesn't matter what happens on this 4th and 9, they still get the first down. Maybe try to play straight up defense, even if it's for that play. Even if you've been getting away with it when the Bucs are on their 27 and it's 2nd and 7, right? Like, even if you got away with it then, maybe try to go about your business a little quote unquote cleaner for that particular down, so that if you do get a stop, because the chances are the ball's not coming to you anyways, if you get a stop, you get the ball back. So I can't remember the last time somebody brought up, that was just an undisciplined play. You could say it wasn't. You can be frustrated with the pass interference, but when somebody grabs hold of a jersey twice, talking about the NFC Championship game, that's pass interference. That's undisciplined football. Play better defense, and you won't have to grab his shirt. That was the most frustrating part about that play. Is that I think it was King, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he got beat. He had to grab the jersey because he got beat. Right. You should be punished for trying to get back into the play, essentially, beyond the rules because you got beat initially.
And also to that same point, when your two all-pros on defense both get tagged for personal fouls after the play. Now, I understand they were both provoked to a certain extent, but also you can choose to just not respond and be frustrated that the first one did get called, because who gets called every single time? Fair or not, it's the second guy.
Right. It is what it is. Play more disciplined football. There are some plays that they just are unfortunate for you. Whether it's the helmet to helmet on the goal line for Green Bay that turns into a touchback, or it was Green Bay, right? Cleveland, excuse me, Cleveland. Sorry, a lot of football. Whether it's that or it's a pass interference that you're frustrated with, not because it's not a pass interference. That wasn't the argument. It was they haven't called it this game, so you should be able to grab the jersey and pull the guy backwards, essentially, which is not make the right call, even if you haven't been making the right call. Sometimes the football is just not disciplined. And to your point, Josh, Patrick Mahomes couldn't make up for anything, for all of it. But part of what helps you make up for that is playing disciplined football. Is getting a stop. When you stop the Bucs twice, essentially, but shoot yourself in the foot both times and they score a touchdown instead. I mean, think about how differently the game would feel if at the beginning of the fourth quarter, it was 24-9 instead of 31-9. Because it should have been at least that, right?
And then you catch that touchdown that went off I'm blanking on who it was.
Right.
The throw that Mahomes had, and all of a sudden it's a one possession game.
But what if with 12 minutes left or whenever the 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the score's 24-16 instead of 31-9? That's nobody's fault for the Chiefs. Even if I don't care if you think it's a knick-knack foul. If it's a foul, call it. And that's what they did. And sometimes it's just undisciplined football. It drives me crazy that's never talked about anymore. It's always the ref's fault. It's never, hey, how about you play defense correctly? Absolutely infuriating that it's not ever talked about like that. And to your point, Chris, I'm so glad that ironically we're talking about it now, but I'm so glad that that's not what we had to start the show with.
Right.
Like we did after championship weekend, because it's just so exhausting for it to always be the referee's fault. Just how about play more disciplined football?
Also, I saw somewhere, if I understand this correctly, that officiating crew threw the most flags on average in the NFL this season.
So that's their MO. That's their MO.
Right. Do your homework and know who your officiating crew is, and that you're probably going to get called for those you might be able to get away with some other times because of who the officiating crew is.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
Good point.
I like that. So there you knew they stuck to their MO, and they stuck to how they officiate games. That was the
but I'm pretty sure I saw that.
And that's right. That was the frustration 2 weeks ago, if there was one. Right. For the people that were frustrated, it was we don't know what we're getting out of our refs. Knew exactly what you were getting this time. Let's take a quick break, unless anybody's got anything else before we put a bow on the NFL season. Coming up, we'll do winners and losers real quick before we round out the show on a Monday. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.